This video is about sacrifices, and the current position is white to move. Try to find the best sequence in this position and write down your answer. You may stop the video now. Were you able to spot the continuation in this position? So here we're looking into sacrifices, right? But here in the current position, we can assess it and evaluate that our pawn is about to promote 2 more squares and we have a queen. Okay, but the problem is, like, if we were to move the pawn forward, the knight can always go anywhere here to then cover the a1 square, and we cannot promote. The knight would just trade for it, right? And then they have 2 passed pawns as well. It's a little bit tricky for the black pieces. So what can we do? Any checks, captures, attacks? Checks, yes. So in this position, we actually have rook d8 check to then have the king move somewhere, and we will be able to trade the rook for the knight, the one that would defend the squares for the promotion of the pawn, right? So here the king would just capture the rook, and then we can just push the pawn forward. The bishop will be too late to be able to grab this pawn. And then, for example, if they don't do anything about it, we have a check that also gives a fork, and then we will be able to win the game from here, right? Because here, if they move forward like this with the pawn, we can always just stop it. And if, like, for example, they were to go with something like this, we can always try to stop the pawn, right? If they check here, we have this, and we can try to win the game from here by grabbing the pawns and then give checkmate to the king. The current position is black to move. Try to find the best sequence in this position and write down your answer. You may stop the video now. Were you able to spot the continuation in this position? So here we have to look for any sacrifices, right? So any checks, captures, attacks. Any checks that we have in the position? Yes, actually we have queen takes knight, but that's not super great. But we have a bishop. Even though our bishop is very strong along the diagonal, here it would be better to just grab the knight with the bishop. Force move to grab back with the pawn, and then we have queen check on the king. So here we have a few lines that we have to always consider, right? So we have the line where they just bring the rook forward. In this position, we would just be able to take the rook here because the knight is covering the f2 square. And then if the king were to move somewhere here, we need to be careful not just bringing the queen to f1 because the queen would just take back, but the queen to e1 will be check, forceful queen move back to the fan, and then just checkmate in this position. For example, in here, if they don't want to just bring the rook like this, they can always just move their king back to the side, right? And then we can always just go for the knight check. If they were to capture with the rook, we'll just capture back with the queen, and because the bishop is blocking the rook, the next move would just be checkmate, unless they want to like lose like this. If they give some breathing room to their king, we can just play on and beat up the exchange in this position. And here in the last line, for example, if we were to give a check, king moves over there, we give a check with a knight. We've seen this pattern before from the previous videos. We go for the smaller mate with the knight check, double check, queen knight, and then the king goes to the corner, and we are able to sacrifice the queen. Cannot capture back with the king because the knight is covering the g1 square, so rook takes and then smother the king, being blocked by its own pieces with a smaller mate here. The current position is black to move. Try to find the best sequence in this position and write down your answer. You may stop the video now. We're able to spot the continuation in this position. So here we have to consider any checks, captures, attacks, right? So any checks in the position, we have a queen takes here the pawn. They can just grab us back here. Queen c2, they can just take the queen back. So nothing like that, right? Captures, same thing here on c4, doesn't really work. Any attacks or threats? We have to consider that the queen is covering here along the diagonal, covering c2. Our pawns are covering e3, d4, so the king cannot really move anywhere. But we need to act fast. If we act slow here by, for example, pushing the pawn to b5, and you might be thinking, oh, they can capture back, and then you will be able to capture with the bishop, they cover like this, and then you will be able to grab the queen like this, right? Or even give a checkmate in this position. But they don't have to capture back, right? So if it's not forceful, they won't do anything about it. So if you push the pawn forward, they can always give some breathing room for their king to be able to escape. Now, if you grab the pawn like this or like this, they will just be able to move back, and then it will just be an even trade. You might be winning, but still not super clear. Okay, so we need to be forceful here, and the best move in the position is actually bishop b5. Bishop b5, the idea of this is that the king cannot move anywhere and we're acting fast. We don't allow them to bring their bishop to c1, because if they were to do this, we can actually create a battery here with the bishop and the queen. If they move somewhere, now we can even give a checkmate to the king here, right? And if they were to move away, we would just win a queen and then win the game from there. So there is no time for that. So if we go bishop b5, they would just capture the bishop. We can actually finish the game with a pawn checkmate here. All the squares are covered and the pawn is defended by the queen.